Have you ever wanted to make art but had the thought that you don't have the right art supplies or you don't have the right skills to do it? Well, today I'm going to be sharing a really simple one-line drawing, a challenge that you can do literally with a piece of paper, a pen, and absolutely no previous art experience.
I'll be demoing 3 creative warm-up exercises today with tips and suggestions as we go along. I recommend definitely using a timer, and up to you if you choose to do any or all of these practices when you have time, and especially before you're getting ready to begin your day or begin another art practice. So I am also creating all of these 1, 3, and 5 minute exercises within a mandala shape. So mandala just means circle in Sanskrit, and I like it because it gives me a container and it feels easier to begin making marks on the page versus if it was a complete blank page or a blank canvas. So what I encourage you to do as you explore these exercises is to allow yourself to make marks without any judgment. This is really like a creative brain dumping, similar to if you were to write morning pages first thing as you wake up. When the timer does go off, I do suggest completely stopping on that practice and moving on to the next one. And there is good reason for that. So partially we're creating creative limitations for ourselves. So we have the time constraint. We also have the stopping point. So even if you start to feel like you're in a good creative flow, we're going to stop on that particular mark making piece and move on to another one. And this can be a really powerful technique for our art practice because we can take that momentum from the one practice over into the next image. And that might be just to share some additional tips or suggestions if you start to feel stuck as you're making marks. It could be that you start to repeat similar patterns that you began with in the first drawing. It might be the exact opposite and you go in a completely different direction. It could be that you start to fill in some of the lines. So in that first drawing, it was purely line-based for me. So now with the second creative warm-up, I'm starting to block in some of the shapes. So I have a bit more contrast with the varying lines as well as just the dark and light colors on the page. So for today's 1, 3, and 5 minute creative warm-up practices and one-line drawings, I am doing everything with just a Sharpie or just one pen is my suggestion. This is, again, another creative limitation. So we don't have that stress or overwhelm around all of our art supplies or about making choices. So by having these limitations with time, with stopping the practice as soon as the buzzer goes off, with using only one piece of paper and one pen, it helps to free up our mind so we can then focus on the actual marks that we're making, on expressing ourselves or having that emotional expression in art, or whatever your intention is for that practice. Of course, you can definitely do this using more art materials, and especially once you start building into like the 5 minute creative practice, you might want to explore using color, either with colored pencils, crayons, markers. You can use pastels. You can also explore this with paints. So this is great for gouache, watercolor, acrylics, paints that you know will dry relatively quickly. So this wouldn't necessarily be a good practice for oil painting unless you were planning on then using that painting moving forward once you complete these activities. Another benefit of these creative warm-ups is that it can inspire other art making for you later. It can help to just remove any cobwebs, especially if you're feeling stuck, and just to get some momentum to make marks on the page. These are also, because they are one-line drawings and I am keeping my pen on the page the entire time, there is that extra limitation as well. And it's also a way that these drawings tend to go slower because we are keeping the pen on the page. And so that slow drawing as a mindful art activity can help to calm us down and bring us to the present moment as well. So you can see at the end of that 3-minute creative exercise, I did start to include a word. The word love came to mind as I was making that image, and I was thinking of a tree. And so you can always add words. It might just be one simple word in the image. You may actually also want to start journaling, especially if you enjoy writing. These can also be great prompts to then lead into a writing practice. And again, I would invite you to allow any words to come out naturally without thinking about them much, without that internal judgment or critic, and just allowing the words to flow. So much about all of these creative warm-ups today, as well as one-line drawing or mindful art activities, is that it's about giving ourselves permission to be free with our creative expression, to perhaps allow emotional expression in art, or to allow ourselves to make without having that extra pressure. It's also a great way just to, I find, deal with stress, especially during COVID or other stressful times. And I find that these are really simple ways that we can start expressing ourselves, start making marks. And again, it can help to lead into other art practices that we might dive into deeper. This can also be a really interesting challenge for yourself if you're used to using certain art media. Let's say you always paint or you always work with collage. This can be an interesting challenge to instead use a pen or a pencil and focus on drawing. It can again just work our creative muscles, and having that creative limitation, we can start to see different shapes or interests come out in our artwork. The other thing I love about these one-line drawings or doing a one-line challenge is that it also removes the preciousness, because we know that we already have that challenge of keeping our pen on the page or the creative limitation of only using one pen. And so we know we're not necessarily going to make this huge masterpiece. We're using, in many cases, I suggest using really cheap art materials for this. So just a piece of paper, just a pen, it doesn't really matter what kind. And so that also helps to remove some of the pressure that can come up around, I need to make a good piece of artwork, whatever that means, or that there's some sort of external or internal pressure around, am I good enough? Is what I'm making good enough? That can often stop us from even exploring art or creativity. And I hear so many people say that they don't think that they're creative, and yet they love gardening or they love cooking and they love these really simple things that they do throughout their day that brings them joy. And so my question or curiosity is often, how can I explore art making with art supplies in a way that feels natural and ordinary and just included in my day as a way that I can express myself and perhaps have a little bit more joy in my life? So there are lots of other ways that we can create mandalas, as well as ways that we can tune into the marks we're making and notice what we're feeling in the moment, notice what some of our mark making might mean. And so if that interests you at all, I do have a mandala course online. I'll have it linked in the description box below. It's a great introduction to mindful art activities. It's one of my favorites because it's really simple, but the writing practice that I've created that's included goes really deep for some inner self-reflection. So I see it as, again, another way of journaling, but through creative expression as well. One thing I recommend also is if you've been wanting to start or get back to a consistent creative practice or a consistent mindfulness practice or mindful art practice, is that this is a great challenge. These 1, 3, and 5 minute challenges or one-line drawings are a great way to get back into a daily creative practice. And so you may want to explore this just 3 minutes a day, every day for the month. Keep a journal and a pen near your bedside and do it first thing when you wake up. You might make marks, you might jot down a couple of words about how you're feeling in the moment, and you just might be surprised how it can shift your day or how it can bring you more to the present moment.
I hope you found this interesting and inspiring. For more videos like this, subscribe, and I will see you in another video.